Hi, PhD students. I'm Joanna Wolf, the communication consultant for mechanical engineering. I wanted to give you some advice on how to prepare for the written and oral components of your qualifying exam. So a basic premise of these materials is that if your report and presentation are very clear, logical, and easy to follow, faculty will start off with a good impression of you before they begin asking questions. So that makes sense. You want them to have an impression of you as a good, competent, logical student. So I'm going to start off with a very high-level overview of the structure of your report and presentation, and then I'm going to go and talk about the details of each section. So let me start at a very high level and explain that the common structure for all scientific writing is called IMRAD, I-M-R-D, or sometimes I-M-R-A-D. And the A there stands for AND. And this format makes it easy for scientists and researchers to communicate with one another because information always follows the same logical order, same pretty standard, clearly labeled section headings so that we always know what information to find in what sections. Now, in mechanical engineering, there are two basic types of the scientific report structure. The first is traditional or for experimental research. This is research that asks basic questions about the world or phenomenon in the world and design an experiment in order to answer those questions. This kind of research follows the traditional IMRAD structure. Now, the other type of report structure that's very common in mechanical engineering, and I think this is more common than the experimental one, is what we call a proof of concept or design report. This is where you are building something in order to solve usually a well-known problem or a well-known flaw in existing ways that things work. And this has a slightly different structure. The focus of a proof of concept or design project is on describing the design and all of the decisions you made. And then there's a method and results, but these tend to be relatively short. And the research question they're asking is basically, did the design work? And the results explain how well the design works. And instead of a discussion, which is a more lengthy section, there's usually a pretty short conclusion wrapping it up. In this kind of report, the focus is on the design, and the method and results are kind of secondary. In a traditional experimental project, the focus is on the results and all of the new knowledge, and that's why the discussion section tends to be longer, because it has to explain how the new knowledge that we gained from these experiments contributes to what we already know about the phenomenon under study. A good test for deciding what kind of project you have is to ask yourself, if I were to write just one sentence that communicated the most important new knowledge gained from this project, would I be writing about the results, the new information I learned from the results, or would I be writing something about the new design or the new prototype that I made? And as a matter of fact, taking your report and writing it in just one sentence, the most important thing to learn from it, is a really good exercise. It really helps you clarify what is the most important thing that you'll want to communicate to faculty as you report and present on this project. Now, as we go through and organize and structure our report, each section here answers a particular question, contains specific types of information. And it's really important that you help readers, that you help other scientists, other researchers, and specifically the faculty who will be reading and evaluating your exam. You really help them find the information they expect in these sections. If you have a traditional experimental report, then as faculty read each section, they're going to want the answers to these questions. So they'll want to know in the introduction, why do we care about this topic? What's the research question? What are you trying to learn or find out? In the methods, they want to know the specifics of what you did, how you set up the experiments, and really importantly and specifically for the exam purposes, why you did it. For the results, they want to know what you found, why it's important, and the discussion, what does it mean, and what happens next. Sometimes the results and discussion sections are combined in traditional experimental reports, though I typically prefer, unless you have a good reason to combine them, to separate them out. Now in a design or proof of concept report, we have a little bit different section headings or titles and different questions that we expect. So in the introduction, we want to know, why do we care about this issue? And when I say why do we care, really kind of think like why does the broader public care about this issue? Does it save money, save time, help the environment, improve safety? What's the big sort of consequential reason for doing this research? And then narrow down into what is the specific problem that you are trying to solve or the specific question you are trying to answer. And I'll go through later on in more detail how to do that. In the design section, now for a proof of concept project, the design section will typically have multiple parts, multiple sections. None of them will probably be called design. Instead, you might say the models and equations or the controller design. So there'll be multiple subsections, but each section should really clearly answer what you did, how you did it, and why you did it. Then you'll have an evaluation section, which might have a miniature methods and results. And so what we really want to know is, did it work? And how much of an improvement did it make? That should be very clear. And in the conclusion, explain what it's important, what it contributes, what the novelty is of your contribution, and what happens next. Now, still at a very high level, you should think of the overall organization of any kind of research report writing that you do as shaped like an hourglass, where the introduction and discussion or conclusion sections are broad. They talk about big questions about why this topic is important, how it contributes to knowledge, why we care. And then the middle sections as being more specific, answering specific questions about what you did, what you found, what you learned. Same thing goes if you have a proof of concept project. You want to start broad. What's at stake? Why do we care? Then the specifics of what you did, and then go broad again to what it means. Now, if you pay close attention to the writing and the language of research reports, you might notice that verb tenses change in these different sections. In the broad sections, you will see much more present tense because you are describing the current state of knowledge, the current state of the world. Whereas when you move into these middle sections, you will see a lot of past tense because you're describing what it is that you did and learned from this specific experiment. So we see present tense in the introduction and conclusion, and more past tense in the design and evaluation section. Now, as I'm talking about these two types of reports, I want you to keep in mind that these are two ends of a continuum, and that there will be many reports, many projects that fall somewhere in between these two. And that's fine. But it's very useful for you to think to yourself whether your project falls more on the traditional experimental side or more on the proof of concept side, because that will change how you organize and structure it, and it will change what information you decide deserves the most emphasis. Now, there's one last point I want to make before I go on, which is that in addition to these main sections, research reports have an abstract. And for your qual project reports, you will have a 300-word abstract. That's a lengthy abstract. And this abstract should be a report in miniature. What I mean by that is that the abstract should have 1 or 2 sentences for each main part of this report. If you have a design or proof of concept project, likewise, your abstract should have a sentence or 2 on the design problem, maybe even more. The introductions tend to be a little bit longer with proof of concept or design projects. You'll describe the most important components of your design, how you evaluated it and what the difference is. Typically, there'll just be a sentence that the evaluation found that this is 15% faster than the baseline or 20% more accurate. There may or may not be a conclusion sentence in the abstract. But the basic point here is that you'll want to include an abstract, and this abstract should really follow the same structure as the report and include all of the important information from each of these main sections.